Good morning, Chair Postman, members, Garrett Vollendroff, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning, everybody. We'll convene the board caucus meeting for July 11th, 2023. Our first item on the agenda is an update on DDE, et cetera. Update from Chandra Brady, Director of Education and Enforcement. Yeah.
Also known as Chandra Wax.
Oh, did I say Brady?
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm so disoriented that you're actually here. So I'm not used to anybody
Just
sitting
read it
next
off
to
the
me.
screen.
Exactly right.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
sorry about that.
That's all right. Good morning, board members and board chair. I'm here today at the board's request to provide an update regarding DDE contaminants found in cannabis and soil from several licensee locations in north central Washington. On April 11th, 2023, LCB enforcement and education staff, along with staff from the Department of Ecology, collected soil, water, and product samples in a 5-mile stretch of land along the south end of the Okanagan River and north of Lake Pateros. The soil samples report is not complete, but according to the Department of Ecology, preliminary results indicate that the levels of DDE, DDT, lead, and arsenic in the soil samples are above state standards. Licensees will be notified and provided copies of test results when final and received. LCB has received final test results from all of the investigatory samples that were collected. Out of 124 product samples submitted, 59 products tested above the 0.1 action limit for DDE. Enforcement and education staff have placed a hold on each of the individually contaminated products and will work with the licensees to ensure those products are destroyed. There were 5 licensees with administrative holds. As of July 3rd, 2023, all of those holds have been lifted. From January 2023 to May 2023, we collected a total of 124 water and product samples traced back to the impacted region. We've received results from the Department of Agriculture lab for all 124 samples. 68 cannabis foliage samples, 56 oil rosin samples, and 3 water samples. 90 of those 124 samples have DDE detections. 37 of those are foliage, and 53 of those are cannabis oil rosin. 59 failed for concentrations above action limit for DDE. 50 of those were oil rosin samples, and 9 of those were foliage samples. In summary, the highest concentration of DDE is 4.6 parts, 46 times the action limit. And that was in a cannabis oil rosin sample. The lowest concentration is 0.018 parts per million in a foliage sample. The average overall DDE concentration in those samples identified is 0.495 parts per million, which is almost 5 times the action limit. Other facts to know are 29 foliage samples are of medium risk. We believe those will rise above action limits if concentrated. 24 of those for DDE and 5 with other types of pesticides. In the foliage samples, in addition to DDE, we found 13 other types of pesticides below action levels. 2 of those allowed, 11 not allowed. In the cannabis oil rosin samples, in addition to DDE, we found 23 other types of pesticide below action levels. In the foliage samples, in addition to DDE, 2 of those other pesticides were above action limits. And in oil rosin, 11 of the other pesticides were above action limits.
Questions for Director Wax? That's fine. I just have one if you can clarify. I think, again, so E&E had placed a hold on each of the contaminated products, and you're working with them to make sure those products are destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. So are there still some holds in place until that destruction is completed, or have they all been lifted?
So the investigatory holds that were placed on the licenses, all of those are lifted, but individual holds have been placed on each of the products that tested above action limits. And so those are still held and will be destroyed.
Okay. And how many would that be? Do you know?
It looks like 59 samples failed for DDE concentration above action limit.
And so that means there's 59 products on hold,
Yes.
like that product line, whatever that is, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, okay. And then does
I
each
have a,
one, one last, each one get lifted as that product's destroyed?
Yeah, well, it is
Or it just
fulfilled, it's
expires.
fulfilled with
You
the
don't have to
destruction
do
of the
anything.
product.
Okay, great. Jim?
so just out of clarification, Chandra, can you tell me, what does that mean for a licensee, these two different holds and lifts, just to make sure I'm very clear?
So when the administrative holds were on the license, for the investigation, we were holding movement, grow, production, sale of product. Until we knew exactly what product was contaminated, where we were at. And now that we have received all of our samples back, we know that there is contaminated product. We're destroying the product that we're aware of. And then one thing I forgot to say in my update, but came out yesterday, is that we will be doing at least quarterly tests of the product that's moving out of that area.
Okay, great, thank you.
And the licensees have been informed of that, right? Like, we're gonna
Yep.
be out there.
On July 3rd,
Yeah.
we lifted the holds, let them know
Instead.
what product was still held for destruction, and then said we'll come out there quarterly.
Right, great.
Thank you.
Good. Any more, Jim? No. So what would be the next opportunity then to update? Should we have you back when all that's, will you be told when it's destroyed?
If
I
you'd like to
assume.
know when it's all destroyed.
I mean, I
will
just
ask you,
sort
yeah.
of curious, like whatever that
Sure.
next step is, or whenever you do that next test, but it sounds like we're at a kind of level ground here at this point.
Yeah, hopefully the next time we would talk about it is when all the destruction was complete. If
Yep.
there were other tests that were to come back positive, because this has been kind of a high profile issue, I would notify the board that we had had more positive and above action limit tests, but hopefully we won't have that happen again.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay in touch. Okay, we will move to, we have one rules petition to review with Daniel Jacobs, and this is about allowing microbrewery warehouses to share space. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Vollandroth. And this morning, I'm going to be previewing a rule petition that I will be presenting for action at the next board meeting on Wednesday, July 19th. On May 22nd, Justin Lay of Dwinell Country Ales submitted a petition to amend Washington Administrative Code 314-20055, Section 4, regarding microbrewery warehouses. That section currently says that microbreweries cannot share warehouse space, and he wants to change that to allow them to share warehouse space. The petitioner went a step further and actually submitted proposed rule language, and the rule language would say that microbreweries can share warehouse space as long as they physically separate the stock and conspicuously label it so that you can tell whose product is whose and where it comes from. Just for context, a microbrewery is a brewery that produces less than 60,000 barrels a year. It's governed by RCW 6624-244, and that statute specifically allows microbreweries to have one off-site warehouse for storage and distribution of their product. As I said, the regulation on the topic specifically says that these microbreweries can't share warehouse space. The petitioner's argument is that allowing microbreweries to share warehouse space would make it more economically feasible, and these are the petitioner's own words, quote, more economically feasible and equitable for self-distributing microbrewery licensees to pool their financial resources in the operation of offsite warehouse space. And additionally, it would allow them to self-distribute their products without the use of a wholesaler. Now, currently, bonded spirit and wine warehouses are allowed to share warehouse space. And this is in the statutes that govern each of those. But bonded spirit warehouses and bonded wine warehouses are a different type of thing entirely. A bonded spirit and wine warehouse is a warehouse that's run by a separate company. And that company, their whole job is to run these warehouses. And part of that, so it allows multiple distilleries or wineries to use that company's warehouse, and it's the warehouse company's responsibility to separate everything and make sure that the stuff doesn't, winery A's stuff doesn't wind up with winery B's lot and vice versa. And from there, the product is distributed. And typically, it's distributed using one distributor. It's using one company to distribute everybody's wine. These bonded wine houses, they're also separately licensed by the TTB, by the federal agency. In contrast, microbrewery warehouses are more like what we call unbonded wine warehouses. And so these warehouses are associated with the specific microbrewery or winery they're associated with. It's, one warehouse per winery or per brewery. And the warehouses really, they can keep their product there and they can sell from it. But the idea is each winery gets its own warehouse, or each microbrewery gets its own warehouse. And just for reference, the unbonded wine warehouse, they aren't allowed to share warehouse space either. So while it would be within our statutory authority to make the requested rule change, the distinction I just talked about is where this becomes a little tricky, because the bonded wine and spirits warehouses, they're a different beast entirely from these unbonded warehouses. While the unbonded warehouses are sort of connected to each individual microbrewery or winery, these bonded wine warehouses are their own thing. And so if we were to start, there's been concerns raised internally that if we were to grant this petitioner's request and start going down this road, we would start muddying the lines of distinction between unbonded and bonded warehouses. I submitted some materials to you last week, and I'll be presenting it in more detail next week. I don't have a particular recommendation that I'm making on this, just because I think this is a decision best left to the board, and the rules team hasn't come up with a recommendation one way or the other. Just one thing we did want to flag is that denying the petition would sort of leave things as they are. There'd be no changes. Accepting the petition would, by the petitioner's own request, sort of open the door to allow microbreweries to sort of pool their resources together and make it easier for them to self-distribute and avoid using a wholesaler. To accept the petition wouldn't mean that we would necessarily be agreeing to change the rule as requested, but if we were to accept the petition, we would likely get input from the very people that the microbrewery petitioner is trying to avoid, namely the wholesalers, the beer distributors. They'd likely have an opinion on this topic. Again, I'm not saying whether or not that should sway our decision one way or the other, but I did just want to make clear that, while it's talking about warehouse and sharing storage space, it's more than about sharing storage space. This is also about the ability to distribute beer, and beer distributors are companies that have opinions. And so I think that again, they would likely have opinions they would want us to know about. That's what I've got for you today, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
This is Ali. So there's no risk enforcement or any other thing of allowing this that it impacts. The only thing we're seeing is, I think you said muddle the line, but this opens up to where the smaller guys can consolidate space or use one location, and it helps with their costs overhead, is what I'm hearing.
So yes, yeah, from their perspective, I mean, in the enforcement division, the concerns came more out of licensing, just because with the muddying the lines, because the bonded warehouses have separate licensure, they're licensed separately, and so they're distinct entities that licensing tracks and keeps tabs on. The financial division also just had some sort of logistical concerns about how this would change their audits in terms of tracking product. But it was more just to say, we track bonded warehouses differently than unbonded warehouses. And so allowing microbreweries to share space is more akin to a bonded warehouse.
But Daniel, don't the microbreweries today distribute their own product?
They do, but they distribute their own product from from each of their own warehouses. They can't distribute their product like 3 microbreweries can't put all their stuff together in one place and all use the same distributor. They could use the same distributor, but they couldn't, like get a 3-for-1 deal.
Right, but could, and is the petitioner requesting that they also be allowed to distribute jointly, not just warehouse jointly?
I don't like it.
Well, so the rule changes to the warehouse is to sharing the space, but where there's a part of the petition where it says, why are you requesting this rule change? The petitioner explicitly said word for word, I'm requesting this because it'd make it easier for me to self-distribute. And then he also said in that way, I don't have to, I can avoid using a wholesaler. So,
right.
But they're just looking to share space and keep their stuff segregated still within that space.
Yes, that's part of the proposal. Yeah, part of the petition proposal is rule language would say, listen, we're happy to still have it all physically demarcated and separately labeled so that we could still tell whose stuff is whose.
Is there, just on the warehouse piece, in terms of, how do they make sure it's clearly labeled in that? What is the ill that we are, concerned about there? What's the downside? Let's say they don't clearly label it, like, mixing company A and company B. What are we trying to prevent there?
So this is sort of, I would suppose that it would be for tracking. I think it would probably be for tracking sales, right? Because just because you're pooling your resources together doesn't mean, I suppose, that a given truck is going to be sending out the exact same number of crates of each type of each beer. And I think that it would be because also if enforcement officer visits and needs to be like, hey, we need to track how you're keeping track of it. If they're like, hey, there's like 3 crates of brewery A in brewery B's pile. And if they're just like, well, yeah, we just do that because we're all sharing the same space. And it's like, yeah, but it's not just about sharing space. There also needs to be tracking. And I think that in the bonded warehouse scenario, where there's also federal regulation and federal taxes and all this other stuff, I think that's where it really becomes necessary. And I think that actually the TTB also requires them to do some of the same stuff. And that's where I think sort of our internal folks were like, hey, some of the stuff they're talking about is getting into the bonded side of things.
Yeah, it just seems to me, and I think this is what we're all seeing, but look, is I would, if we were making a change in the distribution for microbreweries, that seems like that'd be spot on, because that's what changed. If the only thing you're changing is being allowed to share warehouse space, is that the big plus of a bonded house, or is the big plus that it is run as a separate company that distributes all these things? So you don't have to have a distribution chain if you're, using a bonded wine house, right? But again, the microbreweries already distribute their own. So as long as we're not letting them distribute jointly,
right?
Doesn't seem to me we're really poking as much at the bonded house if it's just the warehouse space we're talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that was something when that was something that I had to talk to internal stakeholders about, just because when I first read this petition, I sort of had a similar first impression that was like, they just want to share space.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not that they, and while the rule change itself is just about sharing space, the reasoning behind it and sort of the end goal, and that was something that our internal folks, and I want to give shout out to folks in licensing and finance. They were both like, hey, Daniel, it's not just about sharing space. It's not just a warehouse. It's also from where you distribute. And if the idea is, well, if we all have the same space and we all have the same warehouse and we have a truck that's coming to pick up microbrewery A's product, it would sure be a whole lot easier if they could also take B and C's product too. And they're, if they're all going just on one trip.
But that's our authority.
They're not asking that.
You can't do that.
They're not asking.
We're going to say you can you know, Daniel's Brewery and Ollie's Brewery can share this space here, but you still need separate trucks.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
separate
saying. We can
staff.
define that, right?
And
Yeah,
Daniel,
certainly.
just clarifying, you said accepting it doesn't mean we're actually going to make this change. We're exploring it further, right?
Yes,
And
that's
engaging in
also another thing.
conversation. Okay.
Yeah, that's also another thing. If we can accept the rule petition, start it going, and if every Tom, Jane, and Henrietta comes out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, this is a terrible idea," and that was what I was also flagging, is that it's not just going to be the breweries that are going to have thoughts on this. If we open it up, we may be getting folks from some bigger companies that have national profiles that are like, "Hi, I heard you guys are doing something. We have a several page letter on here are our thoughts on it," and their thoughts might not be resounding endorsement.
Today, you know, being able to distribute your own product is one thing, but we do treat microbreweries different than mega breweries, right? And in a couple of different places that I can think of. And I don't know who would know this, but do we do so out of a policy position that we want to support smaller business or in-state business? Is that
That's a good
why
question.
we do it differently? And if we do, I'd be interested, where are the benefits of being a microbrewery? We know there's a lot of downsides to being the small guy, but they also get some incentives. And it seems to me that there's a state interest, for some reason, predates all of us, for that, right? There's a state interest to treat microbreweries different. I'd be curious what if there is something by next week you can tell us about.
Certainly, and I can look into that more. And the other thing, I'll get better numbers on this. My understanding actually is that most breweries within the state don't count as micro. My understanding is that most of the breweries in the state, because of the amount of output they have, don't count as microbreweries. But I'll get firmer numbers.
Yeah.
Like how many people could take it? How many companies could take advantage of this rule change if we did such a thing and allowed shared warehouse space? How many breweries do we have putting out less than 60,000 barrels a year?
Yeah, I could certainly get you those numbers by next week.
That would help you. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is on for next Wednesday, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Great. Okay. Any last questions? Anything else?
Nope. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank you.
Daniel.
Thanks.
Good job. Okay. We're not a board member and executive assistant reports, but we also have a director report for the first time with our new director, Will Lucella. Started yesterday, and he's going to join us remotely here for a few minutes just to say hi. Will, you should be able to go ahead there. I don't see you yet, but there you are. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, board members.
Morning.
Great to see everybody again. I'm so excited to be part of the LCB team and be able to work with this group. And so I guess my report will be started yesterday. It was a phenomenal day. Today is catching steam already, but I look forward to being able to work with and collaborate with everyone.
It's great. We mostly wanted you here just to make sure you came back for day 2.
I'm here. My plan's to make it through day 3, and then we'll see what happens.
That's that's great.
Reassess.
Yeah, no, it is great to have you here, and I know staff's real excited to get to know you, and you're going to be bombarded by everybody wanting to get in to see you. So hopefully your support team is triaging that in a way that won't overwhelm too soon.
You know what? It's phenomenal. I can tell you that the LCB staff is phenomenal in every way, shape, and form. And so I look forward to it.
Good. All right.
All
Well,
right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like we spoke yesterday brief about this, we did the caucus is our every week meeting. The board meeting is every other. Please join us for each caucus, and you're always welcome to share whatever's on your mind. You could do a weekly report, you can just listen, wait for questions, whatever. But it's great to have you, and we look forward to more conversations for sure.
All right, as do I.
Okay, all right, see you soon.
Okay.
Any further reports from board members today?
I just have one thing, David.
Yes.
So just I met with Jim and Jessica this morning about some focus groups that we're doing with employees. And so I'm just taking every opportunity that I can to remind staff that we're doing these. And these are as a result of the employee satisfaction survey and responding to questions that we want to learn more so that we can become an even better employee than we currently are, and the employee of choice of state employees. And so we've got a number of them coming up, and we're doing them all over the state, and we're doing some virtually. We've got our first one this week, and I just want to encourage folks to participate and to let your staff participate. And actually, I'm asking directors specifically and managers to be proactive and help us recruit people to participate in these events. And I'll be bringing this up routinely until we're done with these. So that's all. Thank you.
Great point. Yeah, please, directors, heed that. And employees, I think you'll get great turnout. When we asked staff for their suggestions when we were searching for new director, we had incredible input and feedback, quick, a lot across the board. So I think we've got a staff that feels pretty open to share their ideas, which I think is great. So I just also would encourage everyone to do it and to be as candid as you humanly can be. This is all just to make us better and to fulfill the commitment we made last year, which is we will follow up on the employee engagement survey with you, kind of not quite one-on-one, but at least in small groups that Jim's going to be doing. So yeah, good. Thank you.
So Jim, this is as a result of the survey that went out when we were asking the question about looking for a new director?
No, this is the employee satisfaction survey, the annual survey that is done.
Okay.
And so we chose a series of questions that were ones that felt like we were maybe low on or we wanted to learn more about, and we're going to ask deeper questions about those.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, at the strategic plan meeting like a year ago, I think it was, we talked about this there, just because we get this report every year, like every state agency does, and you can see where we're working or not, and we try to improve, but we don't, how it is, you just get this question and an answer. And so sometimes you read it and you go, well, I wonder what's behind. Why are they dissatisfied with communication? Why are they dissatisfied with, or why don't they feel more connected to the mission of the agency? And so it's left to directors to kind of go, well, I think that's what this means. So instead, we're going to go and ask people, okay, what were you thinking? And not that we're going to say to them, this is your survey, because we don't know whose survey was what, but to say, look, here's one that's a little low. And one of them is, as I recall, there's always that one about, I know how what I do fits into the bigger mission.
Right, outcomes.
Yeah, and that to me is a real key one. So just want to sit down with people and say, what do you think that, what leads people to say that? Let's get to the real.
Yeah.
Because we want to do better next year.
I guess a part of me, my thought process is having a change in administration and new director. At what point is this where the new director is who leads in here and get this type of feedback and things? So I'm just, are we doing it? Are we, when I say we, is this the board movement or is this
It's everybody.
It's everybody. You're just, okay.
I'm just participating.
Jim is the board
Okay,
representative to it.
All
But
right.
again, this was discussed at the strategic plan, I think for 2 different years in a row, probably. But and so Tony's been involved in that conversation.
Okay,
Ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we had discussion, Ollie, about, well, should we wait given Will's, start date? And we decided, let's just move forward with it. And Jim and Jessica in particular will be reporting back up to him about the outcomes and that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No, we're not poking our nose into it.
Okay. I think
We're-
that's probably what I was getting to.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
This was an agreement, really a commitment by all of leadership a year ago that we would have substantive follow-up with employees
Okay,
on what is kind of behind. And the other thing we should just say is we have great numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, we do really well and some divisions better than others, some answers stronger than others, but overall, this is not out of any kind of crisis at all. It's just, we're gonna bear down. I think we can, like you said, Jim, we can be great on a lot of these things. We just need to talk to people, find out what we can do for them. Things like communicating more. It's not a budget question. It's just be more open, How do you fit into the mode? Got to talk about it. I think some of these things we might find are because of remote work. We don't get the chance to run into each other in the hallway and talk about things. You don't see who's coming and going in the building. Though some of these numbers you'll see track low even prior to the pandemic. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm glad we're doing it and glad you're there, Jim. That's great.
Thank you.
Anything else? Ollie, anything from you today? Okay, nor for me. Dustin, anything to share?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. We will be doing executive management team tomorrow at 1:30. And we will see you all then. Okay, thanks. Have a good day. Anytime I say what we're doing next,